Hi, the 23rd of May, 2022. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel, like my official YouTube videos, and go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as Lady Dorybell, or www.ladydorybell.com for my website. Same thing. So, I am going to go into this particular official YouTube video of mine in a different capacity-ish, to a degree. So, I figure for this particular one, this might be a bit befitting in a different capacity as far as my outfit is concerned. So, I was born and raised in the 1980s and 1990s in the tri-state area. I was born in New Jersey and mainly raised in that area. However, I grew up going to various areas of New York State, such as New York City. Same thing in regards to Pennsylvania, mainly Pittsburgh and Philadelphia as well as Lancaster, though that's kind of important to take in consideration. So in the 1980s and 1990s, if you research it, it is known as far as the factors of the pandemic that occurred in the 1980s and 1990s, the autoimmune disorder syndrome, and the, I can't remember what HIV stood for, but it is a situation that was very much known about in the 1980s, more so into the 1990s. It was more heavily known in what is now called the LGBTQP community, though it was throughout the tri-state area because of the reality of the decade before in the 1970s, which was the revolution regarding the sexual revolution. And so while it was more well brought forward because of the then known as the gay and lesbian community, now known as the LGBTQP community, the facts are that it was impacting everybody. It wasn't just the LGBTQP community that impacted. That impacted what are known as breeders all across the board because of the facts regarding the swinger communities, the BDSM communities, and the LGBTQP communities, or back then, it was called the gay community. It really didn't get called the gay and lesbian community until the 1990s. So, for the longest time, the overall LGBTQP alphabet soup of letters at this point in time, and as a pansexual who was a beard multiple times over in the 1980s, more so though in the 1990s, the very late 1980s, into the 1990s, in a multitude of situations as being a beard. For those who don't know what a beard is, that is someone that is okay with certain factors at the time of informing others that, well, it depends on the situation. Usually what happened with me is one of the guys would be like, I totally want to not be known for, liking guys. So could you be my girlfriend for a little bit? Well, I'm a female and I'm your friend, so that's fine. I can do that. That's pretty much how that went. And so then they would go on and be like, and so this is my girlfriend, and she's so we're together. And then, I'd be over there, and they'd be, and so she's come over here, so not that close, because no, that's fine, supposedly, right, yeah, sure. And then there were the times where it was like, and so, we're totally, together and stuff, can't you tell? Whereas I would just be like, you do know you're failing at proving that you are not gay. You know that, right? And so a lot of times they would try until they finally accepted themselves and was like, okay, awesome, great, congratulations. I'm gonna, yeah, that's awesome. Because it was always funny to me where, you know, especially the bottoms or the twinks that were, she's totally my girlfriend. Yeah. And then, you know, every now and then one of their friends or whoever they were trying to get that to, well, why don't you hold hands? That was usually their response. It's like, yeah. So I'm a female and I'm their friend. Yes. And then, you know, the random points in time where they'd be like, you were supposed to totally like be my girlfriend. Yeah. Again, biological female and being your friend. However, surprise, they don't believe you doing that. You want to know why? Because they literally pointed it out. You know, holding hands. Yeah. You know, and so usually if they, you know, got really bold, you know, they put their arm around my shoulders because, you know, couldn't do that around the waist because, you know, you don't want to imply anything, ironically. Because, you know, if you put your arm around the waist, well, that's a different level of PDA. Because if you do that, then somebody might think you're in a serious relationship. Ooh. Uh-oh. In comparison, you know, so it was as it was during the time frame. And so I kind of just, all right, fine, it is what it is. At some point in time, you're going to accept who you are. They're going to accept you for who you are, and that's just the way it is. And that's how it goes. So it was as it was at the time frame. And, but I didn't really, not that I didn't put much effort in it, it was more along the lines of, okay, well, at some point in time, you're going to be accepted for who you are. What are you going to do afterwards? Because once you are accepted for who you are, what are you going to do afterwards? So realistically, when you take in consideration in the 1980s into the 1990s, the gay and lesbian and then LGBTQP community was more and more well known, more and more well accepted. If you take in consideration that gay and lesbian marriages were capable to be accomplished in the 2000s, from the time frame of the gay and lesbian communities being more well known in the 1980s, well, it was known, it just wasn't known it was a community until the 1980s and 1990s. So in the 1980s and 1990s, you have the community's establishment, and then you have, you know, you have your parades to celebrate, and you have your events to bring each individual forward, and you get the capability for marriage, and you get the capability for having children, whether you adopt or actually, you know, arrange a way for a turkey baster situation, and I'll leave it at that. In comparison. And so obviously it's known that in the year of 2001, on the 11th of September, was the attacks that occurred in New York City, as well as the field in Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon in the DC and Virginia areas. And while yes, it's fantastic over time, a very short amount of time though, the rights to be capable to marry, the rights to be capable to adopt children, well, that's awesome. That's great. I genuinely mean that because of the facts. There are plenty of children who are in the foster care system. Obviously, far too many in my opinion. However, the reality is that with the constitutional rights of the United States of America, that has been capable. Thankfully, I couldn't look as I do if it wasn't for the Constitution of the United States of America. As a biological female in the country of the United States of America, I have been capable and allowed, as a biological female, to have my hairstyle as it is, to have my hair color, well, it's not the shade that I'd prefer, but it's still allowed in the United States of America. My outfits, however I create them, when I've gone out, even the capability to do this official YouTube video of mine, having my website, all of that stuff is because of the constitutional rights of the United States of America. I'm a pansexual, polyamorous female. I'm half Chinese and half a whole bunch of whatever ethnic backgrounds, including 5 Native American tribes. And I am capable to be as I am in the United States of America because of the constitutional rights. And I've made sure not to waste any of it as best as I could. So in regards of, okay, I earn, and again, think about this because you should research other countries to see these rights, because especially with how much the LGBTQP communities have been capable to bring forward so much change in such a short amount of time. Think about the facts that NASA was formated in whatever year, and when in reference to the first known space shuttle takeoffs, you know, just sending something into space, not even an actual human being situation, the first times. And you have, and of course it's not just the United States of America that has done that, however, you have this knowledge. And it's been how long before the computer systems that first sent out whatever satellite of whatever type into space were brought into the general public. So you got the early 1900s, something like that, if not the late 1800s. And in that time frame, I'll say 1900 on the dot in comparison to whatever the actual date might be. From that time into the 1990s, because it wasn't until the 1990s that people in the general public actually started having either a computer, whether it was a desktop, and or whatever video game system. Because I'm talking about in the general larger masses, okay? Because obviously movies and television are not the same. So when you have that to take in consideration, and then you take in consideration that in the 1980s, 1990s, the gay and lesbian community began to be more well known, and in the 2000s, you have marriages and so on and so forth, and those rights. Well, it took 90 years. If you go by the starting point of 1900, 94 years for certain factors, such as certain video game systems that became more popular. In comparison to 20 years from the 1980s into the 1990s into the early 2000s. So when you really think about the progress for technology in that reference to the general public compared to the LGBTQP community to the general public inside the United States of America, what has been the advances since then? Because obviously with the technology portions, you have desktops to laptops to cell phones to tablets to what have you in between and all that sort of stuff. And in the LGBTQP community, yes, you have more labels, you have more descriptions, you have all these things, and yet, realistically, yes, in comparison to ethnic backgrounds, you don't have the lineage the same way as Chinese, or whichever Native American, or Russian, or German, or Czechoslovakian, or UK British, French Canadian French, and then other versions of Venezuelan, Portuguese, Dominican, Italian, so on and so forth, Irish, and yet, and obviously, you know, then you've got Australian and African and various South American, Brazilian, you know, so on and so forth. You have all of this. And in the LGBTQP community, yes, you don't have the length of time because it's not an ethnic background. It's a sexuality. It's and it's especially supposed to be a biological adult in that consenting capacity, in my opinion. I know for a fact, yes, in the gay and lesbian aspects, yes, that is a way in reference that you are born. However, the other capacities of are not in the same way. Not just because of genetics regarding breeding, because life goes that way, but also because of various markers. So I'm medically retired from the Army. I didn't graduate basic training though. I didn't go to AIT. I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, and I was in a coma for a while. I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain that took 8.5 years to dissipate before it was out of view from the MRI and CAT scans. And I've had to work a lot to be capable to get from where I once was, which was literally having to be retaught names of colors, as well as having to be retaught how to count. I had been in college algebra with trigonometry and calculus. I had been in actual college in AP level geometry and biology when I was 16 years old. So I had a lot of work to do to be capable, and even still, I earned 26 scuba diving certifications. That did assist a lot. Well, there is that fact. I'm a biological female in the United States of America. And in some countries, yes, scuba diving isn't really that much of an issue per se, mainly because of the clothing, which is something the LGBTQP community should take in consideration. That it's acceptable in certain locations for biological females, doesn't matter their sexuality, but it's okay for them to descend into the oceanic waters. What rights do they have if they are in any other capacity? other than being a biological female. So in the Austin area in the years of 2010 and 2011, I got into it over quite a few situations. I don't deny that, and those who knew me in person, face-to-face in person during those time frames, very much could go into how I had gotten into it a few times. And some of what I had gotten into was, how are you going to be so wasteful with your rights in whichever of these communities? So it didn't matter if I was in an LGBTQP location. It didn't matter if I was in a BDSM location. It didn't matter if I was in a swinger location or a combination of. Think about how lucky you are to be in the United States of America. Do you know how many people fight to do anything to come to the United States of America because of the rights that we have? Now, yes, there are certain issues because, oh, well, these words and these words and these words and this tone of voice and so on and so forth. It doesn't change the facts, though. What did they come here from? So maybe if hypothetically taking in consideration of certain viewpoints, well, you have two different ways to look at things. If the country is supposed to be open, if the country is supposed to be accepting, and yet at the same time, these other issues, well, what do? Where does your loyalty stay? Where you were born and raised? And however you were capable to come over to the United States of America? Oh, look how easy it is to get into elected office for certain locations because of how the foundation of the United States of America became, as far as the legalities. Well, what do you do at that point? Do you make it easier, or what do you do? How difficult is it? And so in the LGBTQP communities, you know what it is to be outed. Some of the younger ones don't, though. Realistically, they don't know what it's like and of course I was not alive in the 1930s or 1940s or 1950s or 1960s or 1970s. I was born and raised in the 1980s and 1990s, though, and I saw that. I also knew about plenty of military guys in specific to the Special Forces units, which obviously translates to infantry, cavalry, combat arms, and MPs, where those 5 types of units with whatever branches and divisions of whichever specialties, of whatever training, of what have you. There is history regarding those guys that were LGBTQP. Now, first and foremost, you got females that didn't start being allowed into the infantry or other special forces types of operations. What do you think that was for the gay and lesbian community when you have literally, regarding President of the United States of America 42, Bill Clinton and his administration having to put into law in the UCMJ, having to actually do this mandate of don't ask, don't tell. Anybody who's worked on law, you know how much it actually had to take in a guesstimated way for don't ask, don't tell. Regarding the gay and lesbian communities, where were you? Now, Okay, you hear about transgender, so on and so forth, and the various branches and divisions of whichever armed forces of the United States of America, whether it's the CIA, if I remember correctly, a news article being brought up about that. You have certain aspects regarding the FBI, so on and so forth, and obviously in the different branches such as the Army and the Air Force and the Coast Guard and the Marine Corps and the Navy that have these factors to take into consideration. It's been since the 1980s, 1990s. This is 2022. And so, where the aspects of law enforcement and fire department and EMS, and then the automatic assumptions about females who go into whichever branch, they could actually have given birth to children, and yet the automatic assumption, despite. And while yes, okay, I acknowledge I'm a pansexual, I don't deny that. Because I like boobies. I can't be the only person who really likes boobies. I can't. I can't. I acknowledge I'm a biological female, that's fine. I also can acknowledge natural boobies are great. They are. I wish I had. I have implants and I don't deny that. I also breastfed 2 children, and I went from a barely there A cup to an E cup, and because I used a breast pump, I pumped 9 ounces each side every 2 hours. I was literally Bessie the cow in a different capacity. And then when all of the milk, I guess is the way to put it, kind of, I can say it didn't go into the to the pads, which really surprised me. Nonetheless, that's a whole other issue I suppose I can joke about. Nonetheless, that's a whole other bowl of wax in a very different way. Nonetheless, I'm not going in that part of this for this lecture, no. I can make fun of it, but I'm not dealing with that right now, because I will make fun of it. I take that back, because I got internal, because I have landed at the bottom of the ocean in a few locations, including at the Vandenberg area, and so, I can make that joke. What's hidden under the skirt? Peekaboo. Nonetheless, I have a twisted sense of humor. I can attest that to wearing corsets. Maybe that's why it's such a twisted sense of humor, because, you've got to. So, and no, I didn't learn how to do that from LGBTQP. I learned how to walk in heels. Okay, I will give credit where credit is due. I taught myself how to do my own corsets. Thank you. Yes, I did. I learned how to walk in heels, though. Not very well. However, I did learn how to walk in heels because of a transitioning male who was transitioning to a female. And so, I think that, and so, I learned how to walk, because I was told that I have a manly walk, and you're supposed to walk a certain way in heels. And so it was one of those, sure, whatever. I was a tomboy as a child, so, it is as it is. Nonetheless, it does go even to that, because knowing the outing aspect, more so in reference to the 1980s and 1990s. In the 2000s, it's just easier because you have the social media. You have the technology, you have the capability. Yes, there are certain areas where it's been brought forward more so that way there's the understanding. that, you know, the sexuality is as the sexuality is. It is different comparatively to transgender. And especially in my personal opinion, I personally believe that you should be above the age of 21 years old before doing the transition. Personally, my opinion is because of the biology, because your bone structure is still forming, because your hormones are still going in the capacities of, because your brain is still developing. That's my personal opinion. The aspects of scientific portions that can prove that would be capable too. That's my personal opinion though. And so you have all these military guys though, who sign the dotted line. And you have the knowledge that 42, or President of the United States of America, in the 1990s, Bill Clinton, his administration had to sign paperwork. However long it took to get to that point. How many infantry? How many cavalry? How many combat arms? How many MPs? How many special forces types of whatever type, whether it's airborne, ranger, or what have you, or PJ, or special forces coasties, or MRARs, or recon, or MARSOC, or, you know, SEALs. You know, that realistically beforehand. And great, in the general public, awesome. I am genuinely glad. What about them? That's your lineage. When you think about it, how many World War I, World War II, you could see it in regards of leather history, for some. So then you take in consideration overseas. Well, you have the capacity in the United States of America to actually look into that. So Greg Gutfeld's show has poked fun to a degree at the, what is it called, the gender studies. Well, that's probably having to do with the United States of America. Probably. What about the rest of the world? So in 2010 and 2011, I dealt with some individuals who really didn't like when they tried certain things, and I informed them that in other parts of the world, what they were talking about was considered horrific. And some of them laughed at me, of course, and said, how bad could it be? And I told them, just look up the Middle East. Look up in the Middle East what the penalties are. I guarantee you, you'll have a greater amount of appreciation for the United States of America. But what do you do with that? What choice are you going to make with that? And so that's a fact. So yes, there are certain pockets here and there where yes, certain things need whatever assistance is. But what about education? What about bringing that forward to genuinely discuss? So you also have in the United States of America, obviously, you have the swinging community and the BDSM community. Matt from Matt and Bianca reminded me of this. He had a video that was on the Facebook. Yes, I know I say. For those who say, what is it, the boomer thing? Those who were born and raised in certain areas with certain neighborhood individuals you may have been speaking with someone who grew up with a few yentas and or yetis, because that's kind of a thing that they did way back when, which anybody who's been around yentas and yetis, oh, you have that, the computer thing, because those who remember, oh, you have that, it's a the computer thing. Yeah, it's a computer, not the computer, it's a computer. Yeah, you have that, the computer. What is this with this, the what is this? This is, especially from where I was born and raised, there are those who can, let me do a bit of an impersonation a little further on this. So what is this that you have over here? What is that, what is that? That's a what? That's the monitor? What is that the monitor does? What does the monitor do? And so with that, the computer. Oh, well, aren't you smart? Why don't you tell me some more about this, the monitor with the computer? What is this, the computer? Why is it that there are more than one piece to this? If it's called the computer, why do you have multiple pieces of the computer? There's the tower in comparison to the computer. Anybody who has had a Yenta or Yeti and or been in the areas of, why is that? So there's the mouse. What does it does not, it has a tail. Where is it that this tail goes? Into the computer there? Why is it the computer? Because I can count, you know, Shmooly. I can count. So there's the mouse, and that's the one. And then that's the two with that, the monitor for that computer right there. Yes, it is. How many wires are around this thing? Huh? How many of these the wires that you have? Huh? You call it the computer. And then, you know, usually, no, it's a computer. Oh, that's a computer, is it now? It's the computer. Well, what is that? This does not look like a tower. I have been up to the city, you know. I have seen what a tower looks as, and this is not a tower. For those who listening and watching this lecture may have that understanding to the level that I was around when I was a child. Yeah, especially. And so I suppose the term is called boomer now. Back when I was growing up, they were Yentas and Yetis. You gave them respect because Yenta and Yeti knew a lot more than you thought Yenta and Yeti knew. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's how that goes. Mm-hmm. Because then there's that, what is this? Why are there dots when it comes to this piece of paper? So it's just one continuous piece of paper. Don't do that, Yenta. Why? What is it? Because anybody who knows from the 1980s and 1990s, what's the big deal with pulling this piece of paper? Why is it so long? What's wrong with this piece of paper? What? You gonna have a printer? How does this print out of this? And then it's got all these little dots along the side. What are you doing with this? Schmooling! Yes, schmuck! What's this? You're gonna go into the, what is wrong with this? Why you, for those who know. You have to be from a certain area of the East Coast to understand that, especially. I'm sure there are other locations in the United States of America who understand that, with the exception of the paper. Because for those who have, I'm not saying I know from experience, however, I'm going to give an example utilizing exactly what I'm talking about as far as that's concerned with the old printers that had, and then, you know, if they didn't rip it. Because remember, for those who know about those perforations regarding the, because what it took to align, because it wasn't like nowadays. So people nowadays who know what a printer is and have used one, you have the luxury of just putting a stack of pieces of paper in there. So I'm going to take some people. There was a day where along the sides of each piece of paper, it had perforations, and it was like all, so think of a toilet paper roll, okay? And on the sides, they had these perforations with dots or circular cutouts. And so you had to align the paper. It wasn't as simple as just putting the pieces of paper in there. You had to align, so think of like paper towel rolls where you have to twist it, and if one dot was misaligned, you had to undo it if you didn't mess up the piece of paper. And then, for those who know from that time frame, I'm sure similar, it's like, okay, gonna remain calm because I remember that. I can have that flashback right now because I remember it. And then because of how sensitive the printers were back then, and it was as it was. There's so many advancements. And yeah, that's the level of my history regarding certain references and technology, because those who know what type of print. And then the for those who understand that, that's just, you know, I'm not saying I've been around various forms of technology for a long amount of time. What I am saying is I've been around a few. And so, going in reference to how far and how long it's taken to do that regarding technology, in reference to the LGBTQP community, where it started as the gay community and then the lesbian and gay community, and then how that went. Well, what about the BDSM community? Because you know what it is regarding that. And while I very much do know that there are LGBTQ-peers who aren't so much of fans of the BDSM community, mainly because of the leather. It's usually the leather that is the issue for certain ones. Though then there's the swinger community. So why not the assistance in regards of the swinger community? That's the one community where I kind of don't understand that. Because especially when it comes to, I'm just saying. I've been confused by that because of the way certain individuals have chosen to make their opinions known regarding that, and yet, at the same time, I don't know what people think the perception is of, but it still has a history, and it still has a background. And if it wasn't for that sexual revolution in the 1960s and 1970s, the LGBTQP community wouldn't even be around in as such, in a more broad spectrum when you think about it. And so that's kind of something I haven't been capable to understand, because, well, yes, I know there is kind of the backwards situation where, yes, a lot of times LGBTQ peers, they have the different outfits, so on and so forth, the designs, as far as costumes and so on and so forth, hair, makeup, etc. And yet, At the same time, it's the constitutional rights that allow that bring that capacity forward. And so others who move to or immigrate to the United States of America, they have their family and their friends from when they were born and raised back home that they have to think about. Look at certain laws for certain countries. Go research that and see what those laws are. See how that actually impacts. Take that in consideration. And what can be done? What education can be brought forward where it's actually more understood, where there can be genuine discussions and truth? For as many people as I've known throughout the years who have wanted to travel the world, well, where could you travel to actually discuss these studies of yours? Where is it that you, as a civilian, have the capacity to do so? You do have if you want to stay in the United States of America, well, you have the military. You got plenty of these guys as far as the different branches. You got law enforcement, you got fire department, you got EMS. That's a fact. So what is it in regards of other aspects to progress life forward? When you take it in consideration, as many who have gone to protests and riots and all sorts of other situations, where is it that you could take your platform in whatever capacity of to bring awareness to that? You know, what is your ethnic background? So start with that and go research in that ethnic background what the reality is regarding those, especially if you're in the LGBTQP community. Take a look and see. Research for yourself, educate yourself, see what you are lucky and blessed to have in the United States of America. And think about that. What could actually be explained to assist? Because then you have to take in consideration, what is the perception? What is the educational background? And so, you know, there are a multitude of areas and ways that can be. And because of technology, where, okay, obviously certain areas might not be the smartest to go to, however, you still have the capacity to bring that forward. You still have the capacity, because of technology, to reach around the world. It's literally called the World Wide Web in reference to www. And so, if you do so in a respectful way, you know, there's a female I once knew. I had taken a class of hers and I had written as many notes as I could so I could understand. I've been, at that time, I had been awake from my coma for maybe 11 years, and the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain wasn't there anymore for only about 2 years maybe, and then I had been recovering regarding my scuba dive work in reference to the 26 scuba diving certifications I earned, but most specifically my scuba dives out in the Gulf of Mexico as well as out in the Florida region, both from Boca as well as the Florida Keys. And so I was dealing with quite a bit on top of being a single mom taking care of 2 children who lost their biological father less than 3 or a little over 3 years before then. On top of that, in conjunction to well, everything else that was going on at the time. And that female, if I remember, she was either a lesbian or a bisexual or whatever, as far not being rude, I just can't remember. Anyway, her name was Lilith, or Lilith Gray, in the DFW area. And she had done a presentation in reference to the location of the sanctuary and stuff like that when it was open. And additionally, she's the one in reference to finding a silver lining that I had referred to regarding the exercise, which of all people that should be capable to actually think in a more what have you way to actually progress forward, that's something to take in consideration. And so instead of just one aspect or another, there is the capacity to actually bring that forward within more depth and detail. And so I took notations, and because I was being honest in those references as to my own progress on Fat Life, I have posted it on my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, for my own reference, because of my own progress. I didn't believe anybody was really reading anything that I posted because of the facts. It was one thing if I posted in a forum. It's a whole other ball of wax when I posted on my private profile without certain aspects of responses, similarly to my modeling pictures. Why would I ever think that anybody actually read anything? I mean, that's common sense. And so while some people might have whatever opinion they might have, that's their opinion. And so I didn't ever have the opinion because I didn't have a reason to have the opinion that anybody read my work. I haven't had that haughtiness or arrogance to believe that anybody would actually know who I am. I figured, especially as many people who had gotten upset about my memory deficits and my cognitive disorders and my after effects from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, I figured as many people who brought that up, well then, how bad is my memory and what would it be anyway? Because if it's not in the writing aspect in comparison to discussions, because I can remember some discussions, but in regards of my writing, why would I ever think, in comparison to the forum areas, that anything was ever read? I mean, it is common sense when you take that in consideration. And again, it literally has a section that says journal. So then there's that common sense factor. Nonetheless, well, go overseas then and go and educate. As far as her and those types are concerned, in regards to the gender studies, I mean, as many females that I've known that have claimed they wanted to go all over and what have you, I only wanted to travel around the United States of America. That's my personal preference. It's not that I didn't want to see other countries, there's just only certain countries that I wanted to go see and only certain areas. And that was more in other references in comparison. Although there is, I do want to go to Australia because I want to have a pet platypus. I think they're just so cute. They're fluffy, condensed, fairy-sized, more deadly though manatees, because they're fluffy. And instead of where manatees can only stay in the water, platypi can go on land and the water. So and they're so cute with their tootsies. They're fun. Not saying. Want one. Or a few. I want a few because I think there's it's just so cute. So cute. I like platypi, they're so cute. They're so cute, how baby platypi, it's a thing. It's a thing, they're just so cute and deadly, because the spurs. And then, there's baby little swimming octopi. Those are really cute. From pictures I've seen. So, although it's kind of funny because in a different aspect, because I went there. In this lecture in Corpus Christi, I went to the aquarium and there was this little yellowish orange, I don't know what type of fish, while I was talking with a female at the aquarium. And he was doing this. He was trying to be like, it almost looked like he was trying to do a dolphin thing, or because those who have been to SeaWorld, that kind of looked like what he was doing, but like little fairy size. In a fairy size, small, condensed way, of course, comparatively. And so, and then giving kisses because that's what he was doing. So, to get back on topic in regards of comparisons, but that is a reality in different countries and different cultures. So you have the capacity of so many different technological devices. So where I didn't actually record it, I just took handwritten notes the whole time, because that was just what I did. Just for clarifications, in case anybody made the mistake of ever thinking that I actually recorded. No, I actually handwrote the notations. I can write really fast. And when I listen, because I do, I can write really, really fast. I took some classes with a female named Faith in San Antonio, and there were people in the class that were surprised as to how quickly I could write at the same time of asking a question. And I attribute that to, I think it's considered muscle memory from before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. That's just how I've really always been. And I know some people didn't believe that I was a huge dork as a child in the state of Texas, which the irony is people in New Jersey could have probably told people in Texas, no, she is a massively huge dork, like such a dork, except for certain people depending on who you spoke with. But yeah, massively huge dork, to the point where I could write that way even after, in reference to Faith in San Antonio. That's, I think, 5, 6, 7 years after waking up from my coma and still having had the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. And then there's Lilith in regards of 2-3 years after my scuba diving and that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's just how I have taken notes for a while, actually. So that's just how I've always been. Processing the information is different, of course, in comparison. I mean, even in regards of my confirmation class regarding Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, I had a 3-subject notebook. And then I gave up with that 3-subject notebook and I got a trapper keeper, so that way I had enough paper. But because I was such a CDO type of person as a teenager before my head injury, so I had a spiral notebook, I had all my notations, and because I transferred it from a spiral notebook to a trapper keeper, and I had loose leaf paper, I was so CDO. So okay, I've already explained how I have alphabetized libraries regarding the shelves and stuff, and I alphabetized by section of books, and then I alphabetized by the author, and then alphabetized by title if I had more than one book by that. So as a teenager, I had all my notes in a 3-subject notebook that I filled up before December with notations. And so then, because I got a Trapper Keeper, and the paper was different because of the lines and the colors of the lines, and this is how CDO I was as a child and teenager, I had to rewrite it because I am that type of person. Maybe some people could see a reference point, such as my journal blog, The Ordinary PSA, on my website, www.susanmuling.com, also known as www.ladydoribelle.com. Compared to finding a silver lining and finding the silver lining, but with more in-depth, which is pretty much what happened in Lieutenant Presbyterian Church when it came to that, because of the additional education. Well, I remember this, I'm gonna go and look this up and stuff like that, because I was a massively huge dork. Yeah, huge dork to that level. Yes. So, to that level, while some might not have believed, yes, to that level. So while my biological sister, in comparison to myself, of course, because there's a massively huge difference in comparison, obviously, in quite a few ways, I'm sure some have figured that out by now. Nonetheless, that's the facts. So, in reference to the LGBTQP and the United States of America, again, I was capable to earn 26 scuba diving certifications as an unattached female in the scuba diving community. Now, granted, I dealt with certain situations because, well, I was doing my scuba diving my way. And I was gonna do it my way because it's my way, and I was paying for it anyway, so it was gonna be my way. So I was gonna do my scuba diving my way, because that's how dominant as a female. So for those who understand in regards of BDSM, and those who have the background of scuba diving, in whichever capacity, I didn't never really think about it in this way, though there was a class, and I think it was Dallas, where, if somebody asks you or something, I can't remember, but you don't really have to prove it because actions speak that, and yeah, you could explain it, whatever. Okay, I'm so dominant. Before I took the Dominant Mentor program and graduated, that when I was a whopping 8 3/4 years awake from my coma, after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, and after a year-ish, maybe, it's close to a year of that subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain not being in the MRI or CAT scans, I decided I was gonna go into scuba diving without a relationship partner in scuba diving. And then I decided on my own how my school was gonna be, because I didn't have any relationship I needed to worry about as far as some male being all whatever. I was gonna go, as I did, earn my 26 scuba diving certifications on my own. And then, here's where I can make fun of myself while being honest, which is obvious. So I didn't even know that so at International, they might have been upset, which is ironic because I had informed International that I had wanted to do an ocean dive before I went to Florida. And instead of California, where I had preferred, because I wanted to go to the Catalina Islands, instead, Patty Stewart decided to book a trip to the Gulf of Mexico, knowing I was going to go out to Florida, because I told her where the Vandenberg was. And so, so I don't know if there might have been an issue, whether in regards of what have you, in the 2 different scuba dive schools in Carrollton, Texas. Nonetheless, I made the attempts to go to California without knowing that it was Patty in California compared to Maui in Florida, and I didn't know that Patty was in California until 2021. My scuba diving certification was in 2009, all 26 of them. And I didn't know that Maui is based in Florida until 2021. However, that didn't matter to me. So, though there's that East Coast, West Coast situation, hypothetically, nonetheless, so yeah, and that's the irony, because, you know, family vacation regarding my son, my daughter, and my niece, and I out after going to Georgia, which I had informed before. So the irony is, if one particular individual was like, no, she said she was going to go to Georgia, and then Patty was like, no, she did, or whichever way. Oh, she went to Florida, and, you know, somebody else, no, well, it's a line, and something another. Whatever. I went you know, here's the thing, I was so dominant, I didn't pay attention, because that wasn't what was important. Yeah, I had to take care of some stuff, and that was more important. It's kind of how that goes, yeah. So, nonetheless, though, in that reference of the LGBTQP and myself being a pansexual and polyamorous, I actually had completed a hand fasting for a polyamorous couple. I haven't had a hand fasting, let me clarify that. I have completed a hand or a few, but nonetheless, is as it is. I'm an ordained reverend, and in that capacity of, I haven't hidden my background either regarding where I was born and raised. And so it didn't, despite certain, you know, whatever the term, I think RuPaul calls it spilling the tea or something like that. You know, okay, fine. I've brought that up, but see, that's the thing. Even with that spilling of the tea proverbially, it still brings it up. Still acknowledging, not in an outing way, in an acknowledgement way. There's still the freedom of expression, the capability to discuss, not hiding, not pretending, not doing any of that, actually having that capacity because of. And so while I haven't been capable to understand in this length of time, because I do remember certain discussions with various LGBTQP community members where I still don't understand the issues when it comes to certain areas of the LGBTQP community when it comes to both BDSM as well as swinging. Because if anything, it is one of those confusing factors, but also in reference to, since there has been such a large amount of progression in a positive direction, especially when you take in consideration the capability for the marital aspect, for the capability of purchasing property with, you know, the same gender and all that, health care, so on and so forth. Being capable to foster as well as adopt children. At that point, yes, it's good to take care of, though if you're not interested in having children, or fostering or adopting, well, what could you do? Where could you assist? You know, and again, I recommend taking a look in your own ethnic backgrounds. I mean, as many people who have gotten into Ancestry.com sort of stuff and those factors, well, look at where your genetics come from. What are the rights there? And if you happen to know people in whatever elected capacity, then you have that, but you also still have technology and the capability to bring that forward and that understanding. And maybe in regards of certain people, what is it, there's a I don't know what it's called, but it's the, you can ask questions. Well, what if you're one of those gender study types and you do one of those open poll situations and ask in regards of, because of the online situation, and having certain references that you can, especially as many people who are into pop culture, and actually explaining certain things so it's not as whatever viewpoint of, if there's that concern. It's just a thought and those references. Nonetheless, that's this particular official YouTube video of mine. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel, like my official YouTube video, and go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com. And maybe even there's certain individuals who could bring that knowledge more together in reference to both swinging and BDSM in a more in-depth way, because I can't be the only one. Can I? Anyway, you guys have a good day. Today is the 23rd of May, 2022. 23 May, 2022.